The Mary Celeste, the ghost ship mystery. A true story where 10 people vanished from a perfectly seaworthy ship in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. November 7, 1872. Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs stood on the deck of the Mary Celeste at Pier 50 in New York Harbor. He was 37 years old, an experienced master mariner who'd commanded ships since his 20s. This wasn't supposed to be an unusual voyage, just a routine cargo run to Genoa, Italy, carrying 1,701 barrels of commercial alcohol worth $35,000. But this trip was different for one reason: his family was coming with him. His wife Sarah Elizabeth Briggs, age 30, and their 2-year-old daughter Sophia Matilda would join him in the captain's cabin. Their 7-year-old son Arthur stayed behind in Marion, Massachusetts with his grandmother. He had school, after all. Just days before departure, Benjamin wrote to his mother, "Our vessel is in beautiful trim and I hope we shall have a fine passage." His actual letter, preserved at the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, Massachusetts, shows a man with no worries, no premonitions of disaster. The Mary Celeste itself was a 103-foot brigantine, nothing special, just another merchant ship. Built in 1861 in Spencer's Island, Nova Scotia, she'd been christened the Amazon. The Amazon had been unlucky from the start. Her first captain died of pneumonia during the maiden voyage. She'd been in collisions, run aground. When American owners bought her in 1868, they renamed her Mary Celeste, hoping a new name would bring better fortune. It didn't. Benjamin had invested everything, his life savings, into buying a partial share of this ship. This wasn't just a job. This was his retirement plan. So he chose his crew carefully: First Mate Albert G. Richardson, age 28, Second Mate Andrew Gilling, age 25, Steward and cook Edward William Head, age 23, and 4 German sailors from the Frisian Islands: Volkert Lorenzen, 29, his brother Boz Lorenzen, 23, Arian Martins, 35, and Gottlieb Gaudskall, 23. Good men. Experienced men. A later testimonial would describe them as peaceable and first-class sailors. On November 7th, the Mary Celeste sailed into the Atlantic. 8 days later, another ship, the Canadian brigantine Dei Grazia, left New York for the same destination. Her captain, David Morehouse, knew Benjamin Briggs. Some historians believe they may have even dined together before the Mary Celeste departed, though the evidence is slim. They would meet again. But not the way anyone expected. The voyage into silence. For 2 weeks, the Mary Celeste battled rough seas. Captain Briggs recorded the harsh conditions in his log: rough seas, winds exceeding 35 knots. Below deck, Sarah held little Sophia as the ship pitched and rolled. The crew worked the pumps, shortened sail when needed, and rode out the storms. But something was wrong. Water was accumulating in the hold, about 3 feet of it. Not enough to sink the ship, but more than normal. One of the 2 pumps had broken down and needed repairs. And there was the cargo, those barrels of alcohol. 9 of them, made from porous red oak instead of white oak, were leaking fumes into the hold. On November 25th, at 8 a.m., Captain Briggs made his final log entry. The Mary Celeste was 6 nautical miles from Santa Maria Island in the Azores. Land was in sight. The worst was behind them. And then, nothing. No more entries. No explanation. Just silence. December 4th, the discovery. Around 1 p.m. on December 4th, 1872, Second Mate John Wright of the Dei Grazia spotted a vessel about 6 miles distant. Something was wrong with her. She was under sail but moving erratically, wandering like a drunk. Captain Morehouse raised his telescope. His stomach dropped. He recognized that ship. That's the Mary Celeste. For 2 hours they followed her, trying to hail her. No response. Finally, First Mate Oliver DeVoe took 2 men, Wright and Seaman John Johnson, and rowed across to board the mystery ship. What they found would haunt them forever. The deck was deserted. The ship's wheel turned slowly, unmanned. Both fore and lazaretto hatches were uncovered, and her hold, containing hundreds of wooden barrels marked alcohol, held water to the depth of 3.5 feet. Not enough to cause alarm, but more than there should be. In the captain's cabin, they found personal belongings scattered about. Sarah's sewing materials laid out, Sophia's toys on the floor, a sword in its sheath under the bed. These artifacts, or at least photographs of similar items from the era, can be found at the Peabody Essex Museum and Maritime Museum of the Atlantic in Halifax, Nova Scotia. The galley showed no signs of a meal in progress, but there were 6 months of food and water in the stores. The cargo was intact, all 1,701 barrels still secured, though some had leaked. Most of the ship's papers were missing, along with the captain's chronometer and sextant, his navigation instruments. And the lifeboat was gone. A halyard, a thick rope about 3 inches in diameter, was found broken and hanging over the side, suggesting it had been used to tow the lifeboat before snapping. On deck they found the sounding rod, the tool used to measure water in the hold, suggesting someone had checked the water level just before abandoning ship. 10 people had climbed into that lifeboat and were never seen again. The Mary Celeste had sailed herself 400 miles east from her last log position, with no one at the wheel, for 9 days. Under maritime law, finding an abandoned ship meant salvage rights. Morehouse split his crew. DeVoe took 2 men to sail the Mary Celeste to Gibraltar while Morehouse followed with the Dei Grazia. Both ships arrived safely on December 12th. And that's when the real trouble began. The investigation, suspicion, and conspiracy. Frederick Solly Flood, Attorney General of Gibraltar, immediately suspected foul play. The salvage hearings in Gibraltar considered various possibilities: mutiny by Mary Celeste's crew, piracy by the Dei Grazia crew, conspiracy to commit insurance or salvage fraud. Inspectors found what appeared to be cuts on the ship's bow, made by a sharp instrument. Stains on the deck that might be blood. That sword in the captain's cabin seemed to have suspicious stains on it too. Solly Flood's imagination ran wild. Had the crew gotten drunk on the poisonous alcohol and murdered the captain's family? Had Captain Briggs gone mad? Had Morehouse somehow caught up to the Mary Celeste at sea and committed piracy? But the evidence fell apart under scrutiny. The blood stains were tested and found to be rust. The cuts on the hull were old damage. There was no evidence of violence, no missing valuables, no bodies. After more than 3 months of investigation, the court found no convincing evidence of foul play. The Dei Grazia crew was awarded salvage rights, but only £1,700, about 1/5 of the ship's value. The suspiciously low award indicated the court's lingering doubts, even though they could prove nothing. Oliver DeVoe and his men went back to sea with their reputations intact but forever tainted by suspicion. The Mary Celeste was released to her owners. They tried to put her back into service, but sailors whispered about her now. She was cursed. Bad luck. In 1885, her captain deliberately wrecked her off Haiti as part of an insurance fraud scheme. The ghost ship finally died the way she'd lived, under a cloud of suspicion and bad fortune. The fiction that became fact. The mystery might have faded into obscurity if not for a young ship's doctor named Arthur Conan Doyle. In 1884, before he became famous for Sherlock Holmes, Doyle published a short story called J. Habakkuk Jeffson's Statement, about a ship called the Mary Celeste. In his fiction, the crew fell victim to an ex-slave seeking revenge. The story was so convincing, mixing real details with pure invention, that even high-ranking officials asked if any of it might be true. It wasn't. But for decades afterward, people couldn't separate Doyle's fiction from reality. Some of his invented details, like breakfast being laid out on tables, still appear in modern retellings, even though they never happened. The actual historical documents, ship registries, court testimony, letters from the Briggs family, can be researched in archives. The Benjamin Spooner Briggs papers are held at the Phillips Library at the Peabody Essex Museum, containing his letters, family photographs, and the heartbreaking evidence of lives interrupted. There's a photograph of Sarah Briggs holding her son Arthur, the boy who didn't go on the voyage because he had school. A tintype of little Sophia exists too. These images, preserved for over 150 years, show us the real people behind the mystery. Sarah with her serious expression. Arthur, who would grow up an orphan. Sophia, frozen forever at age 2 in that old photograph. In Marion, Massachusetts, in Evergreen Cemetery, there's a cenotaph, an empty memorial. It reads, Capt. B.N.J. Briggs, born April 24, 1835, Sarah E. Cobb, his wife, born April 20, 1841, Sophia M., their daughter, born October 31, 1870. Lost in brig Mary Celeste, November 1872. This memorial stone stands there today, and you can visit it. It's the only grave marker for a family who has no graves. What really happened? The theories. For 150 years, people have tried to solve this mystery. Let me tell you what we think we know, and what remains pure speculation. Theory 1. The explosion that wasn't. In 2007, documentary filmmaker and McGregor and chemist Dr. Andrea Sella conducted experiments with the Mary Celeste cargo. They discovered that alcohol vapor in a confined space can suddenly expand in what's called a vapor explosion, creating a pressure wave that blows hatches off with tremendous force and possibly produces flames, but leaves no fire damage or soot. Picture this: Benjamin is on deck. Suddenly, there's a deep boom from below. The main hatch blows off. Maybe flames shoot into the air. Every instinct screams, the ship is about to explode. He has seconds to decide. His wife and baby daughter are below. 1,701 barrels of alcohol surround them. If that ignites, everyone dies. Everyone into the boat! Now! They scramble into the lifeboat. Someone ties a rope to the Mary Celeste. The plan is simple: get to a safe distance, see what happens, return when it's safe. But the Mary Celeste, still under partial sail, begins moving through the water. The rope strains. Then it breaks, just like that halyard they found hanging over the side, snapped in half. Suddenly they're adrift. The ship sails away. They try to row after her, but a small boat with 10 people, including a 2-year-old, can't match even a partially sailed brigantine. They watch their only hope of survival disappear over the horizon. Theory 2. The sinking ship that wasn't. Some researchers point to that sounding rod found on deck. Captain Briggs may have checked the water level and, with one pump disassembled and 3 feet of water in the hold, panicked into thinking the ship was sinking. There's evidence too that the Mary Celeste's chronometer was faulty, and the ship was actually 120 miles off course from Briggs's calculations. Was he lost? Confused? Did that add to his panic? But this theory has a problem. Benjamin Briggs was too experienced to abandon a seaworthy ship over 3 feet of water. Unless something else happened, something that made a rational man make an irrational decision. Theory 3. Everything else. Over the years, people have suggested giant squids, waterspouts, pirates who left the valuable cargo behind, alien abduction, an underwater earthquake, murder with no bodies or blood, mutiny by a crew described as peaceable and first class. None of these theories fit the facts. There was no violence, no theft, no storm damage, no fire. Just absence. The truth we'll never know. Here's what we know for certain. On November 7, 1872, the Mary Celeste left New York with 10 people aboard. On November 25th, Captain Briggs made his last log entry. They were 6 miles from Santa Maria, Azores. On December 4th, the Dei Grazia found her abandoned, under partial sail, still seaworthy, 400 miles from that last position. The 10 people who sailed on her were never seen again. That's it. That's all we'll ever know for certain. What happened in those 9 days? Where is the lifeboat? Did they make it to Santa Maria and die on the rocks? Did they drift past the island into open ocean? Were they caught in a storm? Did they die of exposure? Of thirst? We'll never know. The Atlantic in November is cold and unforgiving. A small, open lifeboat is no place for anyone, let alone a 2-year-old child. Maybe they lasted hours. Maybe days. Maybe they saw passing ships but couldn't signal them. Maybe they simply drifted until exhaustion and the cold took them one by one. The sea keeps its secrets. Arthur Briggs, Benjamin and Sarah's 7-year-old son who stayed behind, grew up an orphan. He was raised by his uncle Oliver. He married, had children, worked as a bookkeeper, lived a quiet, normal life. He never talked about what happened. How could he? He didn't know. Nobody knew. When Arthur died, he took with him any childhood memories that might have helped solve the mystery. He's buried in Marion, Massachusetts, the only member of his immediate family who has a grave. Benjamin, Sarah, and little Sophia have no graves. No bodies were ever found. Just their names on that cenotaph, and in maritime records, and in newspaper articles from 1872 that you can still read today if you search old archives. And somewhere in the cold, dark Atlantic, the answer remains. Forever lost. Why we can't let it go. The Mary Celeste has become more than a ship. She's become a symbol, the archetype of every unsolved mystery, every disappearance, every question without an answer. She reminds us that even in our modern, mapped, GPS-tracked world, people can still simply vanish. She reminds us that the ocean, despite all our technology, remains fundamentally alien, a vast, indifferent presence that can swallow lives without witness or trace. But most of all, she reminds us of something deeper, our desperate human need for answers, for closure, for stories that end neatly. And sometimes we don't get that. Sometimes the story just stops mid-sentence, with no explanation, no resolution. Just silence. 10 people stepped aboard a ship on November 7, 1872. They sailed into history. They sailed into legend. And they sailed into a mystery that has haunted us for over 150 years. The facts are all there, preserved in archives and museums. The Benjamin Spooner Briggs papers. The court testimony. The ship registries. The letters. The photographs of Sarah and Sophia. The memorial stone in Marion. But the truth, the real truth of what happened on that November morning in 1872, that's gone. Lost with them in the Atlantic. And maybe that's the most important part.